Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Power Word Talk. My name is Tanner, and today we have another One Piece video for you. This is my third attempt at making it, and hopefully it'll be much better than the last two. So for this theory, it's essentially a mega theory, and I'm going to have to break it down into 4 different parts, because otherwise there's just way too much to talk about for one video. So the first video, obviously, as you can read in the title, is about the ancient kingdom and how I believe that the inhabitants of it were mainly ancient giants. The second video will be about the will of D and devil fruits. The third video will be about Joyboy and how he was the first pirate along with the first pirate crew, the D pirates. Then the fourth video, we're going to tie everything together with the true history of the ancient kingdom and the world government. I think we have more than enough information to make good educated guesses so far to be within the same ballpark of what Oda might actually do. So on to this video, I'd like to start with our first piece of evidence that gives us the strongest sign that they truly were ancient giants or some sort of giant race. So for this, we have the giant straw hat that Im was standing in front of, who was also holding Luffy's wanted poster, where obviously Luffy is wearing his straw hat. So that immediately puts a connection there, and it shows just how large the original straw hat was, or what we can assume to be the original straw hat, to be Joyboy's straw hat. So not only is it massive, but we've also seen many parallels of how Luffy is very similar to Roger and how Luffy is very similar even to Joyboy. So we know that Joyboy was a part of the family of D, given that that final poneglyph finally tells the true story of it, the true history. And we know that Luffy is obviously a D, Roger is obviously a D. They can both hear the voice of all things, so it's also safe to assume that Joyboy could do the same, given that he's kind of the main mystery protagonist in the story, from what we can tell. And I think it's also safe to assume that the ancient kingdom were friendly and were nice people for the most part, because they created the ancient weapons and never used them. They never used them to wipe humans off the face of the earth. So then our second piece of evidence is the apology gift, the massive arc that Joyboy left for the Fishman Island. It was a massive arc. What more proof do you need to connect it to him being some sort of giant than a massive ship? And we know that Joyboy left this because it was written on the poneglyph that he presumably wrote himself, although he may have had help from the Kozukis, but it was a very personal letter, which makes me think that he may have done it himself. So then moving on to more large ships, we have the ancient weapons and ancient weapon Pluton. We know that this was created presumably also by the ancient kingdom because they have the poneglyph and the knowledge of where it was and what it exactly was. Whereas if the humans or the world government created it, they could probably just make another one, and we know that they weren't nearly as advanced as the older races, as we can tell by their technology today versus what was available 1,000 years ago or in ancient times. We even see automata on the moon that when NL goes to the moon on a cover story, he powers them all up, and we know that these are very old already. So another piece of general evidence is that giants and ancient giants have been heavily emphasized throughout the whole story. Big Mom's entire goal is the gigantification of her family so she can look at them eye to eye. She's also been teasing killing giants in Elbaf. And then in Punk Hazard, we have the gigantification of the children. And we have a mystery race of giants in the 2 Cool brothers. It's also emphasized that these were all failed attempts. This is even where the numbers came from that were supposed to be an attempt at recreating ancient giants. It was very heavily focused on giants there. And even earlier in the story, we have Elbaf being teased all the way in Little Garden, which we still haven't been to, which is kind of strange that Oda's leaving it to the very last moment to include it in the story. Almost as if he's trying to protect a little secret that he doesn't want to give up yet. So then another piece of evidence is that the ancient kingdom, as described by Clover, depending on the translation, it's a little different, but they all kind of add up to the same thing. The ancient kingdom was an enormous kingdom or a massive kingdom. It says very powerful, but that could also lead into just being ancient giants. I think everything is just lining up too perfectly for them not to be ancient giants of some kind. Another great piece of evidence is when Corazon was talking to Law. He said that he had a folklore back where he grew up, that if there were any misbehaving or delinquent children, then they would be fed to the family of D and eaten, which kind of leads it to be some sort of monster or probably some sort of ancient giant that could be seen as a monster that eats people. So going even further, we know that Wano is connected to the ancient kingdom, and we know that the Kozukis obviously created the poneglyphs around 800 years ago. And given that they created the poneglyphs and have been inscribing all of this information in them, it's very safe to say that they were allied with Joyboy himself. So this puts the ancient kingdom and ancient giants inside Wano. And where are we fighting right now? Onigashima, inside a massive skull with horns. We haven't seen any creature this large yet, which would mean that they're likely extinct, or there's not many of them left. It's So I think that skull is actually an ancient giant. But then we run into two issues with what I've been saying so far. So one is that the Marines weren't even that scared of Ors Jr. when they were fighting him at Marineford. They never saw him, like they were scared that he was big and strong, but they weren't terrified of him in any particular weird way. And the second is that the Onigashima skull is just way too massive to even be compared to the straw hat that Im-sama was actually looking at. That hat was way too small compared to that massive skull that I think may be an ancient giant. But then I have one answer that I think actually covers those very nicely. I think Joyboy wasn't finished growing yet, and neither do I think that Ors Jr. was finished growing yet if he is the same race of giant. I think that the massive skull we see on Onigashima is the size of a truly fully grown ancient giant. Even in Thriller Bark, I haven't mentioned this yet, but we have Ors, the continent puller. He was obviously massive and clearly an old ancient giant, but he wasn't even that old. And to be given the name continent puller, you have to be a little bit bigger than that to actually pull a continent, where if we connect that back to the giant skull on Onigashima, if that creature was alive, would be more than large enough to pull a whole continent. So I think that Ors Sr. wasn't even fully grown yet, just as Ors Jr. wasn't. I think they get much bigger. So I strongly believe that that skull in Onigashima is a fully grown ancient giant. So then even if you take that a little further, have we seen any creatures that have been that massive as to be compared to that massive skull in Onigashima? We may have. In the Florian Triangle, all the way back in Thriller Bark, we saw these massive shadowy figures off in the distance that didn't do anything. They didn't attack the Straw Hats, they were just watching. Almost as if they didn't want their existence to be exposed. And Oda rarely brings things up if he's never going to mention them again. He has mentioned things from the very beginning of the story that are just coming into play only recently. So I think that those shadows may have even been fully grown ancient giants that are hiding from the world government and from the Marines. And of course, Oda wouldn't tell us what they are yet if he didn't want us to know yet. So my final solid piece of proof is again when Corazon was talking to Law. So not only did he say that the D's would eat misbehaving and poorly mannered children, but he also said that the D's are the natural enemies of God. So who is God in One Piece? The celestial dragons. They are continually described as gods or otherworldly beings. They even wear those helmets so they don't have to breathe the same air as all the filthy peasants down below the red line. They live on top, on Mary Joa, on top of the world looking over everyone. A lot of people think that the helmets may be related to space travel or spaceships or something, but I think the whole idea with the moons and space travel is just too convoluted for Oda to throw in the story, and I don't think he would have thought of this at the beginning of the story or even anywhere near it. It's just way too convoluted to bring in, so I'm going to toss that out for now because I don't think it will happen, even though it's a major possibility. But for now, we'll assume that that's not true and that's not why they wear them. It is simply to not be infected and breathe the same air as all these filthy other creatures. So we've seen that the celestial dragons are very cowardly, very slimy, very scummy. They only care about themselves. And what would lead them to be acting this way for so long is if they were the ones that were the true scum of the world, if they were looked down upon, if they were the ones in the dirt, in the gutters, if they were treated as if they were nothing. Of course, that hatred would build up into them believing that they're gods, they're the rightful ones, not the ancient giants who were given all these natural abilities of just strength and being powerful. They were scared of them. They were their natural enemies. And like I mentioned, we've also seen different races of giants, as are the Yeti Cool brothers on Punk Hazard. And then we have the normal giants, and then we have the ancient giants. That's 3 different kinds so far. So there may even be more types of giants in the One Piece world. So like I said, that massive skull we saw in Onigashima may be a type of ancient giant, a certain race of them. Even Ors or Ors Jr. may be a different type of race of ancient giant. So what could it be? So I started looking into it a little more, and then there's a certain kind of giant that stood out to me while I was searching, the Oni. Now, what are Oni in Japanese folklore? Well, they're described as being invincible, unbeatable, and in many situations, they are considered to be devils. We even have Kaido using an iron club that the Oni would use. Perhaps he knows something that we don't about the ancient kingdom. So that's all for this theory. I hope you guys enjoyed. In my next One Piece theory, I'm going to be covering the devil fruits and possibly the will of devils. So that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it recorded and worked a lot better than the last one. If you guys had any issues or anything that you want to bring to mind, leave it in the comments. Let me know what you think. Like or dislike the video, subscribe, share the video. It would really help me out. And I hope you guys enjoyed, because I have 3 more videos coming out that connect this even further and help promote this whole idea even further. So I hope you guys have a good one. My name's Tanner, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.